She slapped me so hard that even God must have turned his face away. Not because of the pain I've felt worse in 67 years, but because my own daughter did it, in front of neighbors, in front of the house I built with these hands, and when her palm met my cheek, it wasn't just skin that burned. It was everything I ever gave her, every brick, every dollar, every prayer turning into ash right there in the sunlight. That day, I didn't shout, I didn't raise my hand. I just looked at her and thought, "All right, baby girl, you've forgotten who I am. Let me remind you not with anger, but with silence." If you're hearing my voice right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about my story. Because this isn't just a story of revenge, it's the story of how a father lost his pride and found something stronger. My name is Arthur Collins, and this is how I took back my dignity. She slapped me once, and the sound didn't just crack the air, it split my life clean down the middle. Palm to cheek, bright sting, my glasses tilted. A lawnmower down the block droned on like nothing sacred had happened. Neighbors froze mid-chore, a woman holding a hose, a boy with a basketball, old Mr. Givens on his porch. Somebody's phone rose like a small black witness. I could taste copper and humiliation and the dust of the porch I'd poured in a summer so hot it boiled the tar in my boots. My daughter Maya stared at me with a jaw I didn't recognize, and her husband Daniel, the man with hands too soft to trust. A nail muttered, "About time." The hose hissed, the mower choked, and the old man in me who learned to swallow pain back in '79, when I broke 2 ribs on a rebar cage, took 1 step backward, not for fear, but to keep my dignity from spilling onto the concrete. "Get out," she said, not a tremor in it. That was the worst part. No tremble, no shame. Her eyes didn't look like the girl I carried through a midnight fever, the child who learned to spell her name on my calloused palms. These eyes were a door shut from the inside. I didn't move. My mouth worked around the one word that feels heavier with age. Why? But the word wouldn't come, and maybe it shouldn't. Some things are too old to beg. A laugh slipped from someone beyond the hibiscus hedge. A neighbor, maybe the kid with the ball, maybe Daniel. I don't know. What I do know is the laugh laid a second slap on me, the public kind that paints your shame in bold print. I smoothed my shirt. I straightened my glasses. I looked at the house I raised from dirt and blueprint and stubborn prayer, and felt something inside me tip. Not anger, not even sorrow, something harder, colder, like a steel rod cooling straight. They say a life turns on quiet hinges. Mine screamed. Later hours or minutes. Time goes crooked when dignity is leaking. I watched the video on a cracked phone. Eddie from 3 doors down slipped me with soft eyes. "Mr. Collins, it's all over the neighborhood app," he said, voice half whisper, half medicine. The clip was 32 seconds. The hiss of the hose, the snap of a palm, my face going slack, then stiff. The caption, "Old man gets put in his place." Hearts and laughing emojis piled like trash in a ditch after a storm. Folks typed bold behind their screens, "Respect goes both ways." He probably had it coming. Families are complicated. Families are complicated. That's one way to say your own child can break you in the same spot you've been patched 100 times. I cupped Eddie's phone and clicked the sound off. The slap played again in silence. Somehow worse. I pinched the screen to zoom in on the porch steps on the hairline crack running east to west across the 3rd tread. I poured that tread in '97 after a 12-hour shift under a sky the color of dishwater, my back shot and my hands numb. "Funny what you see when you're trying not to cry, Mr. Collins," Eddie said. "You want me to take it down?" "You didn't put it up," I said and handed the phone back, "but I appreciate you asking." I walked the perimeter of the lawn just to feel my legs work. The sun had begun to lean. Grass brushed my shins. Somewhere a siren sounded like a promise nobody intends to keep. When I reached the side gate, the one that used to stick in wet weather until I planed it smooth, Daniel was inside the kitchen, backlit by the refrigerator glow, telling her I'd gone too far. Too far how? by having a voice in a home I built. The sarcasm rose in me and died there. I'd spent a whole life turning heat down to low. At dusk, I sat in the truck that hasn't let me down since Clinton's first term, locked the doors and breathed. The mirror threw a stranger back at me, a black man in his upper 60s, edges silver cheek flushed bright where his daughter's hand had landed. I studied the mark and counted concrete pores from memory like beads on a rosary. Driveway in 95, back patio in 02, heft and weight measure in line. I could still hear my foreman's voice from the old job, "Arthur, you set it level, it'll stay level. Plenty of things don't." I'm not a fancy man. My pocket knife's older than Maya. I've got one suit Navy funerals and weddings. I know the price of a 2x4 in spring versus winter, and the sound studs make when they're thirsty for a wall. I also know this: some lines once crossed don't uncross. That day, watching myself become a joke on a neighborhood feed, I learned a new sound: how dignity hums when it's about to make a move. Night came. The porch light threw a cone across the front walk. I didn't step into it. The light felt unearned. I sat in the dark of the truck until the gnats found my wrists and the cool settled into the seatbelt buckle. Memory visited the way it does when you're bruised and proud. Maya asleep on my chest at 3, her breath sweet as bakery air. The time we counted pennies on the kitchen table for her cheer camp and came up $6 short until I sold my fishing rods. The afternoon she took the keys to her first car and said, "Daddy, I'll make you proud," taping a note to the mirror. Keep going. I kept going. Bought drywall on sale, tiled the hallway with knuckles that leaked. Took an extra shift when they offered it and mowed after church on Sundays. All for that girl, for a promise that love plus labor equals respect. Turns out that's algebra, and some numbers lie. Around 10, the house went quiet. I could smell what they were cooking: garlic butter, a little burn. Used to be I'd sit at the table and bless the food. Lately, I took dinner in the garage, pretending to organize toolboxes so I wouldn't be in the way. Tonight, I wasn't hungry. Shame will do that. It eats first. A new noise leaked through my door paper, ripping from a pad, Daniel's voice measuring words. We follow through on the facility paperwork. It's for the best. He's slipping. That's what they call it when age makes you inconvenient. I leaned forward, hands on the wheel. The facility, the papers I'd seen once in a half-open drawer and told myself were insurance quotes. I pushed air out slow. I wasn't slipping. I was choosing. That's a different fall. I went to the glove compartment, pulled a manila envelope soft at the corners. Not many things I kept in their registration. My wife's church program from 2003 and a thin stack of papers with my signature on them, black and neat. Old documents from back when we restructured the deed to save on tax after my wife passed. I hadn't thought about them in years because I trusted love more than law. Trust is a poor bookkeeper. I turned on the dome light and read like a man reads his own name on a list that shouldn't exist. Words I'd glossed now sharpened, retained rights, reversion in default, durable power of attorney. My name next to my wife's steady looped letters. She always signed like she believed ink could bless a thing. As I traced her signature, her voice came to me from an old note in a recipe box. Never let kindness become a leash. She was talking about church folk who took and took, bless their hearts. She might as well have been standing in that truck telling me to stand up. A cricket cheeped. The porch light clicked off. I switched the dome light off and sat in darkness so complete I could hear my breath like a saw through pine. Somewhere a train, the neighborhood forgot it, had rumbled low. The envelope lay on my lap like a warm stone. I'm not a vengeful man, I'm a measured man. But measured ain't the same as passive. There's a weight that comes with age, a second sight. You start to understand the difference between noise and action. Noise begs to be heard. Action doesn't care. I put the papers back, shut the compartment, and rubbed the ridge my daughter's fingers left on my cheek. I thought of the neighbor's eyes, the boy with the ball. Eddie's 2-second hesitation before he hit record. I thought of the crack in the third step, the one I'd meant to fix this fall. Some repairs you postpone until the whole thing shifts under you. Then you fix the foundation. Out on the street, a cat sprang from the hood and ran. The night settled. In the house, Maya laughed at something Daniel said, soft, cautious laughter with corners on it. I pulled the key from the ignition and slipped it in my pocket. The old truck ticked as it cooled. In the side mirror, my face looked like my father's the day he folded his apron and told the foreman, "This ends tonight." I used to think he was being dramatic. Now I understood he was being exact. You can lose a fight and still win the war if you pick your battlefield. Mine wouldn't be the porch where I was made a spectacle. It wouldn't be a raised voice in a kitchen that used to smell like cardamom and cornbread. My battlefield would be paper. Ink. A quiet office where the only sound is a printer confirming a new fact. No flashing lights, no arguments, no witnesses except the clerk who stamps what God and a notary don't argue about. I opened the door and stepped out. The air had that late summer heaviness, like a hand pressed gently but insistently on your chest. I touched the porch post I'd planned smooth when Maya was 12 and wrote her height in pencil marks up the trim. You could still see them if you knew where to look. "I hear you, baby girl," I said, not loud. Loud isn't always strong. The slap was still burning, but it had changed colors. Less red, more iron. I walked to the sidewalk and turned right because turning left would have taken me to the corner where folks still gathered to talk about me. The pavement under my boots felt honest. The stars were sparse and honest too. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in 10 years, and stared at the name, Parker L., the woman who sat with my wife through chemo and explained forms in plain English. The woman who once told me Arthur paper holds people to the truth they try to dodge. My thumb hovered. I didn't tap, not yet. A man ought to sleep before he starts a war. But I saved the number again, pushed it to favorites, and slipped the phone away. I stood on the curb and looked back at the house a long minute. My house. Her house. Our history wrapped in siding I nailed myself. It looked peaceful in the dark. That's the thing about houses, they don't know what they hold. They don't flinch for joy or grief. They just stand until someone with a stronger will says otherwise. "All right," I said to the silence. "We'll do it your way. Quiet, steady, legal." A car glided by, headlights washing my shoes in pale gold. I didn't wave. The night held its breath like it was waiting for me to commit out loud. I did. If the world's going to watch me fall, I told the dark, the world can watch me stand. Tomorrow morning before the store opened and before Daniel brewed his smug coffee, I'd make a call. I'd bring ink to a gunfight. And this time, when the air cracked, it wouldn't be my face. It would be the ground under theirs. I was 25 when I laid the first brick of the house that would one day break me. Back then, my hands were young and fast, skin dark and smooth before concrete dust made it gray. The neighborhood wasn't much yet, just dirt roads and half-framed dreams, but I could already see the walls rising in my mind. I built it for my wife Lena and for the little girl we had just brought home from the hospital. We called her Maya because Lena said the name meant illusion and creation both. "That's life right there," she'd said, holding our daughter close. Something that hurts and heals at the same time. Back then, I believed in work the way some folks believe in God. I'd clock in at 6, pour slabs until my shoulders screamed, come home smelling like lime and diesel, and still find the strength to rock Maya to sleep. When she smiled, I felt like the richest man in Atlanta. The house grew slow but steady, 1 room a year, 1 paycheck at a time. We couldn't afford contractors, so every nail, every pipe, every damn window frame was mine. I used to whisper to her crib, "This house will be your wings." Lena died before she could see it finished. A car wreck on a rain-slick night, some drunk who missed the curve near Decatur. Maya was 6. I remember the way she clung to my leg at the funeral, her hair smelling like rain and sugar cookies. That day, I made a vow, whatever it took, that girl would never know what it felt like to lose everything again. The years that followed carved me hollow. I worked overtime, double shifts, sometimes 3 days without sleep. I fixed things I didn't break just to stay busy. Maya grew and so did my debt. When she needed braces, I pawned my tools. When she wanted dance lessons, I took a side job hauling rebar for a guy half my age. I told myself pain was temporary, pride was forever. Every man needs a lie big enough to keep him moving. That was mine. She was a bright one, always top of her class, always asking why. I remember her sitting at the kitchen table, feet swinging, asking why the sky turns red at sunset. I told her, because even the sun gets tired of shining all day. She laughed, that kind of laugh that fills a house so full it erases silence. For years that laugh was enough to drown out the ache. When Maya got a scholarship to Georgia State, I cried in the parking lot of her high school and pretended I had dust in my eyes. She was the first Collins to make it that far. I sold the old truck to help with books, kept just enough cash to pay taxes and gas for the bus. Every weekend I sent her $50 and a note that said, "Proud of you, baby girl. Keep building." College changed her voice. I don't mean the sound, I mean the tone. She came home talking about progress, about how hard it was to live with old-fashioned ideas. I tried to listen. I told her I wanted her to learn everything the world could teach. She said, "Daddy, you wouldn't understand." Maybe she was right. Education makes some people wider. It makes others taller. Taller people forget the ground they came from. Then she met Daniel. He was polite at first, too polite, the kind that feels like distance, wearing a smile. White, sharp suit, expensive watch. Spoke like every sentence was a deal closing. When he shook my hand, his palm was soft as soap. "Mr. Collins," he said, "I've heard a lot about your craftsmanship." I could tell by the way he said craftsmanship that he meant labor. Their wedding was small. Maya wanted modern, no church, no choir, just a rooftop downtown with string lights and a DJ. I wore the navy suit. When I offered to pay for the catering, Daniel said gently, "You've done enough already." The words were kind, but they landed heavy like a door quietly locking. They moved into the house soon after. I'd planned for that. I thought it'd be good to have family close. But things change faster than drywall cures. Daniel wanted to remodel, tear down walls, open spaces, lighten the vibe. He called my work dated. I told him those beams had held through 3 hurricanes. He said, "Yeah, but they squeak." I told him old wood talks sometimes. It tells you the house is still alive. He laughed, and I swear I felt the nails loosen a little inside me. I started sleeping in the guest room because Daniel said newlyweds needed privacy. Fair enough, but after a few months, privacy turned into boundaries. My tools disappeared from the garage. My chair by the window found its way to the curb. "We're decluttering," Maya said. Decluttering. That's what they call erasing someone slow enough that they don't notice until the outline's gone. Still, I kept building for her in other ways. Paid the insurance, fixed leaks, tended the garden she said she never had time for. I thought she saw it, that she understood love doesn't retire. But she was busy chasing promotions and board meetings. Daniel kept whispering in her ear about equity assets, independence. He was a man who measured worth by ownership. One spring evening, I went looking for the property tax statement, wanted to make sure it was paid on time. That's when I saw it, the new deed folded neatly in a blue folder, the signatures clean as betrayal. Transferred ownership to Maya and Daniel Collins. My name was gone. The date was 2 months old. I stood there holding that paper, the smell of ink still faint, and realized the house I built was no longer mine. I didn't confront her that night. I just sat on the porch and watched the lights in the windows. She came out around midnight with a glass of wine, phone glowing in her hand. "Daddy, you still up?" she asked. I nodded. "You should rest," she said, and kissed my forehead like I was the child. Then she went back inside, closing the door soft but sure. I looked at that door for a long time. Behind it was everything I'd ever built. In front of it, just me and the dark. I thought about Lena, about the promise I made at her graveside. Keep her safe, keep her happy. I didn't know back then that sometimes keeping someone safe means keeping them accountable. Over the next weeks, little things started to disappear. My mother's rocking chair, my old hammer, the portrait of Lena that used to hang above the fireplace. When I asked, Maya said, "We're modernizing, Daddy." I smiled and said, "Modernize slow. Some things break easy." She didn't answer. Daniel started calling me sir, but not the respectful kind, more like the way you say, "Excuse me," to a stranger blocking your path. When he wanted something fixed, he'd leave a note on the counter instead of asking. Once when I offered advice about a plumbing issue, he said, "We've got YouTube for that." I knew then that I was being erased, not by accident but by design. Still, I stayed quiet. Maybe because part of me hoped she'd notice. Maybe because every father wants to believe his daughter will circle back to the man who raised her. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel on the phone. "Once the refinance clears, we'll be in the green. The old man doesn't even know he's off the deed." I felt the blood leave my face. He laughed. Said something about sentiment doesn't pay the mortgage. That night, I walked the hallway barefoot, touching the walls like a blind man memorizing a map. The plaster felt cool, indifferent. I stopped by the height marks I'd drawn for Maya through the years. The last one was age 16, the year she stopped letting me measure. I pressed my palm against it and said, "Still growing, huh?" The house creaked a long, low sound that felt like agreement or warning. I couldn't tell. Morning brought coffee and silence. Maya left early for work. Daniel sat at the counter scrolling his phone. "Morning," I said. He grunted. I nodded at the window where sunlight cut across the floor I'd laid. "Beautiful day," I said. He didn't look up. "Don't forget the gardener's coming. Try not to get in the way." Something in me shifted again, that same steel rod inside turning half an inch tighter. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and set it upside down on the rack. "I won't," I said, voice calm as stone. He smirked without raising his eyes. Good. That was the day I stopped being their helper. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because I finally understood you can't build respect on foundations someone else already decided to sell. That night, I opened Lena's old journal again. Her last entry read, "Don't let the things you build own you." I closed the book and looked out the window at the house glowing warm in the moonlight. It looked perfect from the outside, every line straight, every joint tight. Only I knew how hollow it was inside. I whispered into the dark, "You wanted light, Daniel. Let's see how it feels when I take it away." The first real crack didn't come from the walls. It came from her voice. Not loud, not sharp, just different, like warmth had been traded for precision. "Daddy, you left the porch light on again." She said it the way a landlord might scold a tenant, not the way a daughter talks to her father. I looked up from the recliner, my recliner, though by then Daniel had started calling it the old chair, and said quietly, "I leave it on so you see your way home." She smiled without looking at me. "We've got motion lights now. You don't have to worry about that." Motion lights. That's the thing about them, they only turn on when something moves. I was standing still and she'd stopped seeing me. Daniel's presence in the house was like humidity. You don't notice it until you can't breathe. He filled the space with polite corrections. "Arthur, don't bother with that. Arthur, that's outdated. Arthur, maybe let the professionals handle it." Professionals? I'd built half this neighborhood before he was born. One Sunday morning, I found him in the kitchen staring at my old tools laid out on the counter, like evidence. He lifted my hammer, the same one I used to hang the first photo of Maya on these walls. "Don't you think it's time to let go of these antiques?" I told him. "A man's tools are his handshake with the world." He smirked. "Well, the world's shaking hands with software now." Maya laughed, not cruelly, just absent-mindedly, the way people laugh when they want to agree without thinking. That laugh lodged in me like a splinter I couldn't reach. The next few months blurred together her promotion, his new car, the furniture that arrived in boxes big enough to bury history. My framed photo disappeared from the hallway. The one of me holding baby Maya wrapped in a towel, both of us smiling at the camera like tomorrow was ours. When I asked about it, she said, "Oh, it's in storage, Daddy. We're curating a new aesthetic." Aesthetic. That's what love becomes when money edits the story. One evening, Daniel hosted a dinner for his colleagues, people with clipped laughs and expensive watches. Maya asked me to eat early in my room just so there's enough space. I didn't argue. I sat at the small table by the window and listened through the wall, the sound of wine glasses, their practiced laughter. Someone said, "I love what you've done with the place." Daniel's voice followed, "Thank you." We rebuilt everything from the ground up. From the ground up, I nearly choked on my cornbread. He said it again louder this time, and they clinked glasses to celebrate his vision. My hands shook a little. I stared at the veins under my skin, those crooked blue lines that had carried 30 years of work, pain, and faith. All for a life where I couldn't sit at my own table. Later that night, after the guests left, I saw Maya standing by the sink in her black dress, tired, barefoot, beautiful. I almost forgot my hurt for a second. I said, "You look like your mother when she was your age." She smiled faintly, but the compliment bounced off her. "Please, Daddy, don't bring up Mom tonight. It makes people sad." "People?" I asked softly. "Or you?" She didn't answer. She just turned off the kitchen light and left me standing in the dark. The next morning, I found an envelope on the counter. Inside was a brochure for a senior living community. Nice one, polished lawns, smiling faces, a tagline that said, "Dignity in every detail." No note, no handwriting, just the brochure. I sat with it for a long time. The coffee went cold beside me. Daniel walked in, tie knotted, perfect phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice me at first. When he did, he paused, then smiled that polite smile again. "Oh, you found it." "Found what?" "The brochure." "It's just information, Arthur. We're thinking ahead, that's all." "Thinking ahead for who?" "For all of us," he said smoothly. "You deserve comfort, community, your own space." My own space. I looked around the kitchen, every tile I'd laid, every cabinet I'd hung. "Seems I had that right here." He shifted his weight, lowered his voice. "Don't take it the wrong way. Maya worries about you. You've been forgetful. Forgetful." That word hit harder than the slap would later. It wasn't about memory, it was about erasure. That week, Maya started keeping the front door locked during the day. She said it was for safety. I had the spare key, but every time I used it, I could feel the pause in her eyes, that flicker of annoyance before she remembered to smile. At night, I could hear them whispering. The words floated through the thin wall like smoke. "He's slowing down. It's for the best. He won't understand." I understood just fine. They were rewriting me in real time, turning me from father to burden, from builder to ghost. One evening, I heard a knock at my door. Maya stepped in, holding her tablet. "Daddy," she said gently, "can we go over something together?" It was a legal form, durable power of attorney. "For emergencies," she explained. "In case something happens." She smiled, but her eyes were steady, too steady. Something like what I asked. "Oh, Daddy, don't make this hard. It's just paperwork. You trust me, right?" I looked at her the same way I once looked at Lena when we bought our first home, trying to see the truth inside the promise. But Lena's eyes were all faith. Maya's were calculation hiding behind love. "I trust you," I said quietly. "I just don't trust your husband." She sighed, frustrated. "Daniel only wants what's best for us." "For us," I repeated. That word keeps shrinking. She left without another word, closing the door a little too hard. The sound lingered in the air, final like a judge's gavel. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house made noises I hadn't heard before, clicks, hums, mechanical sighs. Daniel had installed smart devices everywhere, lights and thermostats and locks that listened. Even the walls felt like they were watching. At 2 a.m., I stepped into the hallway. The motion light flicked on, washing everything in cold blue. I saw my reflection in the new glass door, an old man in pajamas, barefoot, invisible in his own home. I thought of Lena again. Her voice from long ago, soft but certain. "Don't let your kindness be mistaken for permission." So I stood there in that sterile blue light, my daughter sleeping on one side of the wall, my past on the other. And for the first time since the house was built, I didn't feel like it belonged to me. Not the walls, not the air, not even the memories. Just one thought stayed steady in my chest, heavy as wet cement. They were building a new life on my foundation, and I was the first thing they planned to tear down. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of warm Georgia day where the air feels thick enough to drink. I was in the yard fixing a loose hinge on the side gate. I could still smell the oak from the boards I'd cut myself 20 years ago. The screwdriver slipped once, bit my palm, drew a thin red line. I watched the blood bead up and thought some things still answer when you press hard enough. Maya came out onto the porch, her voice sharp with irritation. "Daddy, I told you we're having guests. You can do that later." I wiped my hand on a rag. "It'll take 5 minutes." Daniel's voice followed hers, smooth and loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Arthur, please, can you not make noise today? We've got people coming over." "Noise," I said. "I'm fixing your gate." He sighed, that deep, exaggerated sigh that says you've already lost the argument before it begins. You don't need to fix everything you know. Some things aren't broken until you touch them. The words landed like nails through old wood. Maya's friends started to arrive, cars lining the curb, laughter spilling into the yard. I stayed quiet, set the screwdriver down, and brushed the dust from my jeans. I could have gone inside, but I didn't. I wasn't hiding in a home I'd built. They gathered on the porch, wine glasses and bright clothes. Daniel played the host, shaking hands, smiling that magazine smile. When he introduced Maya, his voice softened with pride. "And this is our home," he said. "Our home." Not a single glance in my direction. Someone asked about the yard work, how he kept it so clean. Daniel chuckled. "We hired help. The old man next door offered to do it cheap." There was laughter. I heard it like gravel in a tin can. And then I realized they were looking at me. The old man next door. The heat in my chest was slow, not the kind that flares and fades. It built like pressure in a pipe about to burst. I stepped forward not out of rage, but because my legs refused to stand still in that humiliation. "That old man," I said quietly, "built this house before you could tie your shoes." The porch went silent. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Maya's glass froze halfway to her lips. "Daddy," she whispered, that warning tone people use when they're embarrassed by their own blood. Daniel grinned, hands raised like a man defusing a bomb. "We're just joking, Arthur. Relax." "I'm relaxed," I said. "I just don't like lies told on my porch." And then before I could step back, Maya did something I'll never forget. She turned to the crowd, laughed softly, and said, "He gets confused sometimes. He thinks everything's still his." The guests chuckled, polite, awkward, eager to move past the discomfort. But for me, time stopped. My daughter, my only child, had just erased me with a single sentence. Not with anger, not with cruelty, with indifference. I looked at her, searching for the little girl who once tugged on my pant leg to show me her drawings. She wasn't there. All I saw was someone else. Someone who wore her face, but none of her warmth. I turned to leave. I could feel every eye on me, a dozen witnesses to a father shrinking. I made it halfway down the porch when Daniel's voice followed Arthur. "Maybe you should rest. The heat's getting to you." And then it happened. I don't remember her stepping closer. I just remember the flash, her hand slicing through sunlight, and the sound. That sound. A slap, sharp, hollow, final. The kind of sound that doesn't echo because silence rushes in too fast. My head turned before my heart caught up. My cheek burned, but not as much as the space inside my chest. The laughter that followed, quick, nervous, human, was worse than the pain. Daniel froze. The guests froze. The world tilted for half a second, then straightened again, leaving me the only thing out of place. I didn't move. Didn't shout, didn't raise my hand. I just looked at her, the hand that had slapped me, still trembling, the wedding ring glinting like mockery in the light. The neighbors had stopped on the sidewalk. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" Another said, "Lord, that poor man." I could hear every word. And still I didn't move. Because if I had, I might have done something I couldn't take back. Maya's voice broke the stillness, cold and clipped. "Go inside, Daddy. Please, you're making this worse." Worse, I asked softly. You think this is the worst it gets? Daniel stepped forward, trying to usher her away. Enough, both of you. But it was already done. The crack had become a split, and everyone had seen it. I walked away slowly down the steps I'd poured with my own hands across the lawn. I'd seated myself. The grass bent under my boots like it understood something the humans didn't. Every sound felt distant, the chatter returning, the music resuming, her laughter forced, but functional. Life moving on as though a man hadn't just been struck down by the same child he'd carried on his shoulders through every storm. When I reached the sidewalk, old Mr. Givens was sitting on his porch, shaking his head. "Arthur," he said quietly, "you all right?" I nodded once. My mouth couldn't shape the truth. He didn't press. Old men know the kind of silence that follows humiliation. I walked until the neighborhood changed, where the roads cracked and the lawns weren't perfect anymore. Sat down at a bus stop, still smelling the faint perfume of her hand. In my head, I replayed the sound, over and over. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop. Every replay stripped something from me first. Pride, then patience, then that thin layer of denial that keeps a father believing love can't turn against him. I looked down at my palms, rough and dark, the same hands that had caught her when she fell, that had built her cradle, her home, her life. And I realized in that moment, those hands could build again. Maybe not walls, maybe not for her, but something new. When I finally walked back, the party was over. Paper cups in the grass, music off, lights dim. She was sitting on the porch alone, mascara, smudged shoulders shaking. "Daddy," she started. But I raised a hand. "Don't," I said, not angry, just finished. She tried to speak again, but her words died in her throat. I stepped past her, opened the front door, and went to my room. Inside, the air felt heavy, still carrying echoes of laughter and shame. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about my father, a man who never raised his voice but could move mountains by walking away. That night I understood him for the first time. When someone takes your dignity, shouting won't bring it back. You have to build something louder than words. You have to act. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the hum of the refrigerator and the ache of my cheek. I walked to the window and looked out at the house. The lines, the symmetry. The years of my labor turned into her comfort. I whispered, "You took my respect in public. I'll take your comfort in silence." The moon caught the edge of the window frame, and for the first time in months, I smiled, not with joy, but with clarity. Because I finally knew what I had to do. Not tomorrow, not soon, but quietly, deliberately, completely. She'd learned that even a broken foundation can shake the whole house when it decides to move. I didn't sleep that night. The slap kept replaying, looping in my skull like a film reel I couldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her face, not angry, not sorry, just empty. That blank space where love used to live. I sat in the dark, the sting still printed on my cheek, my hands resting on my knees. The clock ticked too loud. The house breathed without me. By dawn, I wasn't angry anymore. That's the dangerous part, when the heat burns out and leaves something colder. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and still like pond water. Watched the steam rise and thought, if silence can destroy a man, maybe silence can save him too. I walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the same one where neighbors had watched her hand cross my face like judgment. Their blinds had twitched, their mouths had whispered. They'd seen everything. But it wasn't their eyes I felt. It was my father's. He used to say, "Arthur, pride ain't a sin if it's the only thing keeping you upright." I'd built my life on that, concrete blood and quiet pride. I wasn't about to end it crawling. So I made a vow, no shouting, no begging, no revenge that stinks of noise. My answer would come the way storms come, without warning, without permission, and strong enough to rearrange everything it touched. That morning I drove to the storage unit I'd been paying for since Lena died. I hadn't been there in years. Dust lay thick on the padlock. Inside were boxes labeled in her handwriting, wedding, baby taxes, house deeds. I sat cross-legged on the floor like a man sifting through the ruins of his own life. The air smelled like old paper and motor oil. Somewhere between the yellowed photographs and folded quilts, I found the folder I didn't know I'd been looking for, the old legal papers Lena and I signed when we refinanced the house 20 years back. Back then, I was just trying to keep the bank off our necks. But Lena was smarter than I ever gave her credit for. She'd insisted on including a clause that gave me retained interest in the property until death. Her idea of protection, she always said, "Arthur, one day, that girl's heart will belong to someone else. But at least the roof won't." I ran my thumb over her signature, still steady and confident. I could almost hear her voice. "Don't let kindness be mistaken for surrender." That was the moment the decision took shape. I spent the next few days quietly gathering information, visited the courthouse, spoke to a clerk who remembered me from my construction days. "You built my cousin's porch back in '02, she said, still holding strong. "Glad to hear it," I told her. "I need to check a title." She looked up the records and nodded. "You're still on there, Mr. Collins. Legally, that property can't be sold or refinanced without your consent. My consent." The words hummed in my chest like a low drumbeat. I walked out of that courthouse lighter but steadier, like a man holding a weapon too sacred to swing recklessly. At home, I said nothing. Maya avoided my eyes the way people do when guilt starts whispering. Daniel was all politeness, acting as if the slap had evaporated with the night. He even asked, "You want me to pick you up anything from town?" "Arthur." I smiled thinly. "No, son, I've got everything I need." He didn't know how true that was. The next morning I went downtown to see Linda Parker, an old family friend and the only lawyer I ever trusted. She used to sit with Lena during chemo, translating the fine print of insurance papers into plain English. When she saw me at her office door, she frowned. "Arthur Collins, I haven't seen you in a decade. You look tired." "I am," I said. "But I'm done being tired." She gestured to the chair. "Tell me what's going on." I laid it all out. The disrespect, the transfer of ownership, the slap. I kept my voice even, but every sentence felt like swallowing glass. When I finished, she leaned back, eyes soft but sharp. "Arthur," she said quietly, "you still hold controlling rights. You can act on that, legally, meaning she said you can sell the house. Without them." I nodded slowly. "Would that be final?" "As final as paper gets," she said. "Once filed, no reversal without your signature." There it was, the clean, simple truth, the power of ink. I took a deep breath. "Then I'll do it, but quietly, no notice, no warning." Linda studied me a long moment. "You sure this is what you want?" I smiled, though it wasn't joy. "I don't want revenge, Linda. I want peace. And sometimes peace has to be purchased with shock." She nodded, understanding. "Then we'll do it right." I drove home in silence, radio off, the hum of the road sounding like memory. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a minute, staring at the house. The curtains were open. Maya was inside, phone in hand, smiling at something Daniel said. For a moment, I almost felt love again, that foolish father's hope that maybe tomorrow she'd come to me, apologize, ask for forgiveness. But then she laughed, that same careless laugh from the day of the slap, and the ache hardened back into resolve. I whispered, "All right, baby, you chose your side. Now I'll choose mine." That night I took out my old tool belt. Not to build, but to remember. Each pocket had a story, the pencil stubs, the worn tape measure, the rusted nails. Proof that I had shaped this house with my own hands. I laid the belt across my lap like a soldier polishing his medals, and thought of my wife again. "You built this home for her," I said to the empty room, "and now you'll build your dignity on the ashes of it." The next morning I went to the bank. The clerk was young, polite, unaware she was witnessing a quiet war. I handed over the documents Linda had prepared. "Sale authorization," I said, "effective immediately." She checked the forms, looked back at me. "Are you sure you want to do this, sir? It's a family property." I met her eyes. Her pen scratched across the paper. That sound, not the slap, not the laughter, was the one I'd remember. Ink sealing fate. When I got back, Daniel was outside washing his car. Water sprayed in perfect arcs, sunlight glinting on chrome. He waved, oblivious. "Morning." "Arthur, morning," I said. "Nice day for washing away old dirt." He laughed, thinking it was small talk. Inside, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open bills spread around. She looked up briefly. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, sweetheart," I said. My tone was calm, almost gentle. "You sleep well?" She nodded, distracted. "Busy day." "I imagine so." I poured myself coffee, steady hands, steady heart. The quiet between us was thick, full of ghosts. She didn't know that by the time the sun set, everything she owned would start slipping from her grasp. She didn't know that while she thought I was just an old man patching fences, I was already building her lesson brick by brick, clause by clause. That evening I stood in the backyard and watched the last light fade over the roof. I whispered to Lena wherever she was, "I'm doing what you'd want, not out of spite, but out of self-respect." The wind moved through the trees like approval. I'd made my decision. The papers were in motion. The silence had been weaponized. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. The kind that comes before a storm. Revenge, if you can even call it that, didn't arrive with thunder. It came with the sound of a pen, quiet, deliberate, final. Linda filed the paperwork on a Wednesday morning just before lunch. The air outside her office smelled like rain, the kind that lingers before breaking. I signed my name twice, once on the authorization, once on the sale order, and with each stroke of ink I felt a piece of myself lift off my shoulders. Linda slid the papers into a folder and said, "Once the buyer signs, it's done. She'll get the notice after the transfer. You don't have to deliver it." "I want to," I said. She looked at me long and steady. "Arthur, be careful. What you're doing is lawful. Yes, but it's going to break her." I gave a tired smile. Then maybe she'll understand what it feels like to be broken. The buyer was a middle-aged woman named Nancy Pierce, a real estate investor who specialized in flipping heritage homes. I met her at a diner near the courthouse. She wore a red scarf and ordered her coffee black. "You built the house yourself?" she asked. "Every inch," I said. "It's solid," she said. "You sure you want to sell?" "I'm sure," I said. "I'm just not sure she deserves to keep it." Nancy didn't ask more. Folks who deal in property know the weight of silence. By the time we shook hands, the deal was sealed. She promised a fast, close cash offer, no contingencies. It was done within 48 hours. That's the thing about justice done in silence. It moves faster than guilt. Back home, the rhythm of the house carried on as usual. Maya tapping on her laptop, Daniel pacing with his phone. They had no idea their home already belonged to someone else. For the first time in months, I felt free. I started humming when I brewed my coffee. The house didn't hum back, but that was all right. I'd stopped expecting warmth from walls that forgot my name. I spent those 2 days living inside a secret, a dangerous, beautiful secret. Every time I saw Maya pass by, every time I heard Daniel's voice floating down the hallway, I thought, "You just don't know yet. You think I'm gone, but I'm still here, deeper, quieter, stronger." Friday morning, I put on my best shirt, the same one I wore at her graduation, and drove to Linda's office to collect the final documents. The transfer had gone through. The deed no longer had her name. The house legally and irrevocably was gone. When I saw the official seal stamped in blue, I ran my fingers over it like Braille memorizing the texture of victory. Not the loud kind that shouts or celebrates, but the sacred kind that restores balance to the world. Linda handed me the folder. "It's finished." "Thank you," I said, "for helping me build something I can stand on again." "You know she'll hate you for this," Linda said softly. I nodded. "Maybe for a while. Maybe forever, but she'll respect me again even if it's too late to say it." That evening I prepared myself for the revelation. I wasn't nervous, just still. Still the way a man feels before closing a chapter that's been rotting too long. I waited until the sun hung low, gold spilling across the porch where it all began. The same porch where she'd slapped me, the same porch where neighbors had watched me lose my dignity. Now they'd watch me reclaim it.
Maya was inside on the phone, pacing. "Yes, we can push the refinance another week," she was saying.
Dad's being cooperative now. Cooperative. That one word was worth the whole plan. I knocked on the doorframe. She turned, startled. "Daddy, what are you doing out there? I came to bring you something," I said, stepping in. She smiled faintly, distracted. "You didn't have to." "What is it?" I placed the sealed envelope on the table. "Just read it." Daniel walked in behind her, curious. "What's this, Arthur? Proof," I said. "Of what?" "Of how fast respect can disappear." Maya frowned, tearing the envelope open. She unfolded the deed, scanned the first line, and froze. Then again, and again, each time slower. When she looked up, her face was pale. "What? What is this?" Daniel leaned in, read a few lines, and his jaw dropped. "This says the property's been sold." "That's not possible." "It's possible," I said calmly. "It's legal, and it's done." Maya's hand trembled. You sold the house." "Yes," I said, quietly, cleanly, just like you erased me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Daniel's face reddened. "You had no right. I had every right." I cut in. My voice didn't rise, but it filled the room. That house stood because of me. Every brick, every beam, every inch of that land. You took my name off the walls. I just took the walls. Silence, the kind that makes air heavy. She whispered, "Daddy, why?" "Because you forgot who built your foundation," I said. "And sometimes the only way to remind someone what something's worth is to take it away." Daniel tried to speak again, but I lifted a hand. "Don't. This isn't your conversation." He glared, but stayed still. Maya sank into the chair, eyes wet. "Where will we go?" "You're smart," I said gently. "You'll figure it out." "You always do." Her tears came fast, then the kind that have more shame than sadness in them. "I didn't mean—" "I know," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't mean it, you just did it." The neighbors had begun to gather again. I could see their shapes through the window, curious, expectant. Daniel shouted, "You'll regret this." I smiled. "Regrets for people who doubt their decisions." I don't. I turned to leave but stopped at the door. "You wanted freedom from me, now you have it." And then I stepped outside. The porch boards creaked under my boots the same way they had the day of the slap. But this time I wasn't trembling. The air smelled of cut grass and justice. Behind me, through the open door, I heard Maya sobbing, the paper rustling like dry leaves. Daniel's voice rising in panic. I didn't turn back. Old Mr. Givens was watching again from across the street. He nodded once, slow and approving. "You did what you had to, son," he said. I tipped my cap. "No, sir. I did what a man should have done a long time ago." That night I packed my things, only what fit into one suitcase: a few shirts, my old Bible, Lena's photo, and the tool belt. When I walked out for the last time, I paused by the doorway and touched the frame. It still had that small dent where Maya had slammed her tricycle years ago. I traced it with my thumb and whispered, "I built this for love. I'm leaving it for peace." Then I locked the door, my door still, and left the key on the porch rail. The house glowed behind me, a hollow monument to lessons learned too late. The sale was complete. The revenge was silent. The dignity was restored. But in the quiet of that drive away from home, I realized it wasn't victory I felt. It was release. And maybe that was the truest kind of revenge, walking away from cruelty without carrying a single piece of it inside you. It was a Saturday again, fitting somehow. 1 week since the slap, 2 days since the sale, and not a breath of peace in that house. The morning sun sat low, the air heavy with that southern humidity that makes time itself drag its feet. I'd planned the moment carefully, though I never thought of it as vengeance. It was revelation, truth laid bare without need for words. You see, when someone humiliates you in public, it isn't anger that haunts you. It's the echo. The eyes that watched, the silence that followed. The echo lasts longer than pain, and I wanted that echo to ring in her ears, not mine. So I chose that day, the day she usually hosted her Sunday brunch for the neighbors she wanted to impress. I knew the timing, the faces, the wine glasses, the laughter, all of it, and I knew what it would mean when the truth arrived. By the time I pulled up, the yard was already crowded. Cars lined the street again, just like the day of the slap. I parked a block away and walked slowly, steady, coat button despite the heat. In my pocket, the deed folded crisp, legal, sealed, final. The sound of laughter floated from the porch, Daniel's voice smooth and bright. "We're planning a small remodel next month," he said to someone, "thinking about a home office, maybe expanding the kitchen." I smiled to myself. The irony was almost biblical. I walked up the path, boots crunching gravel. Heads turned before I reached the steps. Conversations faltered. Daniel looked up, that easy smile flickering just a little. "Arthur," he said, "we weren't expecting you." "No," I said, my voice calm as a slow river. "You weren't." Maya froze by the door, glass in hand. The sight of me must have reached into her somewhere between guilt and disbelief. "Daddy," she said quietly, "why are you—" I held up the envelope. "To deliver this." I walked past her up the steps and into the center of that polished crowd. The same spot where she'd slapped me. The same sunlight, the same porch boards, the same witnesses. Only this time, the silence belonged to me. I placed the envelope on the table between the wine glasses and said, "Your house is sold." No shout, no anger, just words clear as a verdict. A small gasp broke from someone near the door. Another person whispered, "Sold." Maya blinked like she didn't understand English anymore. "What? What do you mean, sold?" Daniel snatched the envelope, tore it open. The papers unfolded in his shaking hands. His eyes darted across the lines, his lips moving silently as he read. Then the color drained from his face. This can't be right." "It's very right," I said, "and it's finished." He looked up, his voice cracking. "You sold our house." "Correction," I said. "I sold my house, the one I built."
The one your wife took my name off of like it was a stain on her furniture. The guests shifted uneasy. Some looked away, some stayed frozen, eyes flicking between Maya's face and mine. Maya's voice trembled. "Daddy, please, not like this." "Exactly like this," I said. "You taught me how public pain feels. Consider this your lesson in public truth." She shook her head, tears forming but not yet falling. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just didn't think it would cost you anything." I finished for her, but every cruelty has a receipt. Daniel slammed the papers down. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said. "You wanted independence. Now you've got it, just without the roof I gave you." A quiet ripple went through the crowd. Neighbors whispered. Someone muttered, "My God." I turned toward the street where they'd all watched her slap me days ago. The same faces were there now, but the judgment had changed direction. Maya sank into a chair, her voice barely a whisper. "Where will we go?" I looked at her for a long time. For a moment I saw the little girl. She used to be the one who'd bring me lemonade in summer, the one who'd say, "One day, Daddy, I'll buy you a big house by the lake." I almost reached out to her, almost, but memory is a dangerous mercy. "You'll find a place," I said softly. "But you'll remember this one." I turned to the crowd because it wasn't just for her. It was for every person who'd watched me lose my dignity and thought it was funny. Respect, I said, my voice low but steady, isn't given by age or money. It's built like a house, brick by brick, and if you neglect the foundation, it crumbles. Sometimes the only way to remind people what keeps a house standing is to let it fall. No one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of leaves and the soft whimper of someone's glass setting too hard on the table. I looked back at Maya. "You taught me that silence can hurt. Today I'm teaching you it can heal too." I took a step back. "Goodbye, baby girl." She reached for me, then a trembling hand. "Daddy, please." But I was already walking down the steps. The world outside felt lighter.
The sun was bright but not blinding, the air clean again. As I reached the street, old Mr. Givens called out from his porch, same as before. "Arthur!" I stopped. He nodded slowly. That was something. "Had to be done," I said. He smiled, eyes kind. "You didn't raise your hand, son. You raised your worth." I nodded back. That was the plan. Then I kept walking. The whispers grew behind me, but I didn't care. Let them talk, let them tell the story, let it spread like rumor and truth, mixed together the tale of an old man who'd been slapped by his daughter and answered without shouting, without violence, without sin. Just silence and a signature. By the time I reached my truck, the last of the tension drained from my body. My hands no longer shook. My heartbeat felt steady, grounded, old but alive. I opened the door, sat behind the wheel and exhaled. The house stood in the distance behind me, still shining in the sun, but it wasn't mine anymore, and that was the point. I whispered, "That's enough, Lena. It's done." Somewhere deep inside I could almost feel her nod. I started the engine and pulled away slowly. The road curved south toward nothing in particular. Behind me the house and the humiliation grew smaller until it was just a shape in the mirror. Ahead the road stretched open and quiet the way I like it. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel old. I just felt free. The days after the revelation unfolded like slow thunder. Not loud, just steady rolling through every corner of the neighborhood, shaking windows without shattering them. I didn't have to say a word. The story carried itself. It always does when truth and humiliation trade places. I stayed away, of course. I had no reason to linger near the wreckage, but news travels fast in small towns, faster than grace. By Monday, people were whispering about it in the grocery store. By Wednesday, it was the kind of story told in low voices at church, always starting with, "Did you hear about Arthur Collins?" They said the daughter who once slapped her father in front of neighbors had been left standing in her own yard, clutching papers she couldn't tear, begging for a house that no longer belonged to her. And they said the old man walked away without a backward glance. I rented a small room at the edge of town above a bakery that opened before dawn. The scent of bread and rain greeted me every morning. Peace smelled like yeast and silence. I didn't watch the news, didn't answer calls. But people still found their way to me. They always do when shame needs an audience for balance. The first to visit was old Mr. Givens. He knocked softly, hat in hand. "She's been asking around for you," he said. "I know. She looks worn, Arthur, like the world's been teaching her lessons faster than she can learn 'em." I poured him coffee. "That's how lessons work when they're earned late." He nodded. "You gonna talk to her?" "Her, no," I said simply. "Not yet, maybe not ever." He didn't argue. He just looked at me a long while, then said quietly, "You didn't just sell a house, son. You sold her comfort. That's a heavy thing to take from your own blood." "I didn't take it," I said. "She gave it away when she slapped her father in front of strangers." He sighed, nodded again, and left me to the sound of the rain. A week later, I heard she'd tried to fight the sale, went to lawyers, begged, pleaded, but Linda had tied every knot tight. There was nothing to undo. Every signature had the weight of law, every clause the sound of my resolve. I heard she moved into a rental apartment on the other side of town. Smaller, bare walls, cheap light. Her voice, the neighbors said, had lost its sharpness. Some said she cried often. Some said she didn't speak at all. I didn't know which was true, maybe both. Daniel stopped by once 2 weeks later. He looked younger than I remembered, but older where it mattered in the eyes. Guilt can age a man faster than work. He stood at my door, shifting his weight like a boy about to confess something. "She's not doing well," he said finally. "She can't sleep. She blames herself, but she also blames you." I nodded. "That sounds about right." "She's lost everything, Arthur." I met his gaze. So did I. He swallowed hard. "She's sorry. Tell her that's a good start," I said. He hesitated. "You don't want to see her?" "Not yet." "Why?" "Because forgiveness means nothing to a person who hasn't learned what they're asking for." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he sighed and nodded. Before leaving, he said, You know you didn't just teach her. You taught me too. I smiled faintly. Then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Time moved differently after that. The air felt cleaner. My thoughts slower, clearer. I walked every morning down the old road to the pier where the gulls screamed and the river moved like glass. I didn't feel triumphant, just balanced, like the world had finally righted itself on its axis. Sometimes I wondered if she passed by the house, now someone else's. I imagined her looking at it from the sidewalk, seeing strangers through the window, realizing that love, like property, can't be mistreated without consequence. I hoped the walls still smelled faintly of the meals I'd cooked for her when she was little. I hoped she remembered the sound of my hammer, the way I used to whistle while fixing things. Maybe memory would teach her what I no longer could.
One afternoon, Linda called me. She came by the office, she said. I said nothing. She didn't argue. She just wanted to know why you did it. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, that you didn't do it out of hate. You did it because a man has to live with himself when the world stops respecting him. Silence hummed through the line. She cried, Linda added softly. Not for the house, for you. For a long moment I said nothing. Then I whispered, then maybe she finally understands the cost. In town, the whispers softened over time. They stopped saying revenge and started saying justice. Some said I'd gone too far. Others said I'd shown restraint most men wouldn't have. But I didn't care for their verdicts. The story wasn't for them. It was between a father, a daughter, and the silence that now stood between them like a monument. Months passed. The seasons turned. The ache in my chest grew quieter. Sometimes I'd find myself watching the sky and thinking about Lena, how she used to say, Arthur, when people stop listening, stop talking. Let the wind do it for you. I understood her now more than ever. The wind had spoken for me, and it carried my message where words would have failed. By the end of that year, I'd packed my things again. Just one suitcase, the same as before. A new horizon called one without ghosts, without gossip, without the echo of that porch. Before I left, I stopped by the edge of town. There was a bench overlooking the house I once built. It looked smaller now, quieter. The paint was different. The garden trimmed, the laughter gone. For a long while, I just sat there, letting the memories pass through me, not painful anymore, just distant. When I stood to leave, I whispered toward the house. Though I knew she wasn't there, respect is like a roof, Maya. You don't notice it until it's gone. Then I walked away this time, for good. The fallout had run its course. The pain had done its teaching. And what remained was peace, the quiet kind that feels like forgiveness, even when no words were spoken. Because sometimes the greatest justice is not what you take from others. It's what you finally give yourself, the right to live without cruelty, the right to walk away whole. The road that led out of town was long and sun-bleached, stretching toward the horizon like an old scar. I drove it in silence, the windows down, the smell of dust and freedom mixing with the hum of the tires. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was done looking back. Behind me, that house, her house, my house, our house stood like a monument to everything I had built and everything I had lost. Ahead, the world was open again. For the first time in years, I didn't carry anyone else's expectations in my hands, just my own peace. I reached the coast by nightfall, a small town with a single streetlight that flickered like an old heartbeat. The ocean's breath rolled in heavy and constant, like time itself refusing to stop. I rented a weathered cabin by the sea, peeling paint crooked porch windows that rattled when the wind changed. It was perfect. The landlord, a gray-haired woman named June, asked no questions. She just handed me the key and said, "It's quiet here. Folks don't bother each other much." "Good," I told her. "I've had enough noise to last a lifetime." That night, I unpacked slowly. One suitcase, a few shirts, a razor, my old Bible, and the photo of Lena holding baby Maya in her arms. The corners were bent, the colors faded, but the love in it hadn't dimmed. I placed it on the windowsill facing the sea. Outside, the waves crashed against the rocks, steady and unbothered. I sat by the open window, the salt wind brushing my skin, and whispered, "We're all right now, Lena. We made it." In the weeks that followed, I built a rhythm. Mornings I'd rise before the sun, brew black coffee, and walk down to the shore.
My knees ached on the steps, but the air was clean, and the light off the water was enough to make me forget the years I'd carried on my back. The locals didn't ask much. They called me Mr. Collins from the sea road. Some days I'd help the fishermen mend nets. Some days I'd sit on the bench outside the diner and listen to the radio hum through the static. No one knew my story, and I didn't offer it. Around here, peace wasn't something you chased. It was something you respected by keeping quiet. And in that quiet, I healed. At night, I often found myself staring at the photo on the sill. Sometimes I talked to it. Sometimes I talked to God. I'd tell him I wasn't angry anymore, not at Maya, not at myself, just tired. Tired, but grateful. You spend a lifetime giving your time, your sweat, your dreams to the people you love, thinking they'll protect what you built. But the truth is, love doesn't guarantee gratitude. And respect doesn't come with bloodlines. Sometimes your own children are the ones who teach you how deep disappointment can go. But pain, if you let it, can teach you grace too. Months passed. One morning I received a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. It was from Maya. Her words were shaky like she'd rewritten them a dozen times. Daddy, I don't know how to start. I can't ask you to forgive me because I'm not sure I deserve it. I lost the house, but I see now I lost something bigger, long before that, your respect. I can't undo what I did. But I want you to know I understand it now. Every slap echoes back someday. Mine did. It hit me harder than I ever hit you. I'm working again. I'm trying to start over. Daniel left. Maybe he couldn't stand the shame. I don't blame him. I blame myself. I hope wherever you are, you're safe. I hope the sea is kind to you. I love you even if I never said it right. Maya, I read it 3 times. Then folded it carefully and tucked it behind the photo of her and Lena. The tears came quiet. The kind that don't sting, they just wash.
That night I walked down to the water. The moon was full, the tide high. I stood where the waves broke at my boots and whispered, "She's learning, Lena." The hard way, but she's learning. The sea didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Its rhythm was enough. Years have passed since then. I'm an old man now, older than I ever thought I'd get. My hair's white, my hands slow, but my heart somehow lighter. People sometimes ask me, the few who know a fragment of my story, if I ever regret what I did. I tell them no. Not because I enjoyed it, but because I learned something sacred from it, that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destruction, it's clarity. To see the truth, to act with dignity, to walk away clean, that's the quiet justice life allows to those who've been wronged. And maybe forgiveness in its truest form isn't about forgetting. It's about living well enough that the wound no longer defines you. Every morning I still wake before dawn. I brew my coffee. I sit on the porch of my cabin and watch the first light break over the water. The ocean never apologizes for its waves. It just keeps moving, shaping, erasing, renewing. I suppose that's what I've done too. I've spent my last years learning that dignity isn't something others can give you, it's something you choose to keep. So I tell my story, not for pity, not for praise, but for anyone who's ever been broken by the ones they loved most. If you're listening, remember this: respect is not owed, it's built. Love is not proven by words, but by care. And when both are gone, you must still protect your peace, even if it means walking away from the house you built with your own hands. I finish my coffee as the gulls cry above the surf. Somewhere out there, my daughter is living her lessons, same as I am living mine. And that, I think, is enough. Because in the end, peace isn't found in revenge or reconciliation. It's found in knowing that you chose dignity and never let anyone take it from you again. You know, people keep asking me if I regret what I did. Selling her house, walking away, leaving everything behind. And every time I tell them the same thing: no, I don't regret a single step. Because a man can survive heartbreak, poverty, even betrayal, but he cannot live without dignity. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strength finally finding its voice.
If you're watching this, remember respect isn't something you demand, it's something you protect, even if it means standing alone. I'm Arthur Collins, and this was my peace, not my revenge. Now tell me, what would you have done in my place? Leave your answer in the comments.